What if I told you that the richest king in human history, a man who accumulated over $2 trillion in today's money, left behind a blueprint for wealth that has nothing to do with luck, inheritance, or get-rich-quick schemes? King Solomon's wealth wasn't just legendary, it was systematic, and the principles he used 3,000 years ago are still creating millionaires today. Here's what makes this different. Solomon didn't stumble into riches. He built an empire using 7 specific strategies that most financial experts completely misunderstand. And by the end of this video, you're going to see why the wealthiest people in history, from Rockefeller to Buffett, have followed the exact same patterns. I've spent years studying ancient wealth systems, and what I discovered about Solomon's methods will challenge everything you think you know about building wealth. In the next few minutes, I'm breaking down the 7 silent secrets that turned a young king into the wealthiest human being ever recorded. And the 5th one is going to flip your entire perspective on what it means to get rich. Let's start with the secret that unlocked everything else. Secret number 1 is the wisdom before wealth principle. And this is where most people fail before they even begin. When Solomon became king at a young age, God appeared to him and offered anything he wanted: unlimited power, immortality, mountains of gold. Solomon asked for one thing: wisdom to lead his people well. Now here's what nobody tells you about this story. Solomon understood something that modern neuroscience has only recently confirmed. Your ability to make money is directly limited by your ability to make decisions. Solomon didn't ask for wealth because he knew that wisdom would generate wealth automatically, while wealth without wisdom disappears. A study of lottery winners found that 70% lose everything within 5 years. Why? Because they got the money before they developed the wisdom to handle it. Solomon reversed the formula. He built the mental framework first, and the wealth became inevitable. But here's where it gets interesting, and this connects to the 2nd secret. The 2nd secret is the multiple income stream strategy, and Solomon took this to a level that makes modern diversification look like child's play. While everyone focuses on the gold and silver that came into Jerusalem, almost nobody talks about how it got there. Solomon didn't have one business. He had dozens running simultaneously. He controlled the copper mines of the Arabah Valley. He ran merchant fleets that traveled to Tarshish and returned with gold, silver, ivory, and exotic goods every 3 years. He taxed the trade routes between Africa and Asia that ran through Israel. He bred and sold horses and chariots. He had agricultural operations producing everything from grapes to olive oil. Here's the mind-blowing part. Solomon received 666 talents of gold annually. That's 25 tons of gold every single year. And that didn't include revenue from merchants, traders, and neighboring kingdoms. His wealth wasn't coming from one source. It was flowing from a system of interconnected revenue streams. Modern wealth follows the exact same pattern. The average millionaire has 7 income streams. Billionaires have even more. But most people are still trying to get rich from a single paycheck. Solomon proved 3,000 years ago that wealth comes from multiplication, not addition. And this leads directly into the 3rd secret, which explains how Solomon scaled faster than anyone in his generation. Secret number 3 is the strategic partnership rule, and this is where Solomon's genius really shows. The most famous example is his alliance with the Queen of Sheba. When she visited Jerusalem, she brought massive amounts of gold, spices, and precious stones. Most people think this was a diplomatic gift. It wasn't. It was a business deal. The Queen of Sheba controlled the incense trade routes in Arabia. Solomon controlled the trade routes to the Mediterranean. Neither could maximize their profits without the other. Their partnership created a monopoly on east-west trade that made both kingdoms exponentially wealthier. Solomon didn't compete with the most powerful people around him. He partnered with them. He did the same thing with King Hiram of Tyre. Hiram had the cedar wood and skilled craftsmen. Solomon had the gold and the vision. Instead of trying to develop everything himself, Solomon traded 20,000 cores of wheat and 20,000 baths of olive oil annually for Hiram's resources. Both kingdoms prospered. Here's what this means for you. The fastest path to wealth isn't working harder in isolation. It's finding strategic partners who have what you need and need what you have. Every major fortune in history has been built on partnerships, not solo grinding. Solomon understood that collaboration multiplies possibilities while competition merely divides existing resources. If you're starting to see how these principles connect, you're going to love the next one, because this is where most people give up right before they break through. The 4th secret is the long-term investment mindset, and Solomon's patience was almost superhuman. He spent 7 years building the temple in Jerusalem. 7 years. Most people today won't commit to a business plan for 7 months. He spent 13 years building his own palace. 20 years of his reign were dedicated to construction projects before he saw full returns. But here's what's fascinating. While those projects were under construction, they weren't just expenses. They were investments, creating jobs, developing skills, building infrastructure, and establishing Jerusalem as the political and religious center of the region. The temple alone attracted visitors and trade from every surrounding nation for centuries. Solomon planted forests that wouldn't reach full maturity in his lifetime. He developed water systems that served generations after him. He built fortified cities like Hazor, Megiddo, and Giza that secured trade routes for decades. Every major decision he made was calibrated for long-term compound effects, not short-term wins. Research shows that the average millionaire thinks in decades, while the average person thinks in days. Solomon thought in generations. That's the gap between building wealth and chasing money. When you extend your time horizon, your decisions automatically improve because you stop optimizing for immediate gratification and start optimizing for sustainable systems. Now, most videos would stop here and tell you to just think long-term. But there's a fifth principle that makes everything else actually work, and nobody talks about this one. Secret number 5 is the value creation over extraction philosophy. And this completely changed how I think about money. Solomon didn't get rich by taking from others. He got rich by creating value that didn't exist before. The temple wasn't just a building. It was a pilgrimage destination that put Jerusalem on the map. His wisdom writings created intellectual property that nations paid to access. His trade systems created efficiency that benefited everyone involved. Every transaction Solomon orchestrated left both parties better off. That's why kings and merchants wanted to do business with him repeatedly. He wasn't a zero-sum thinker. He expanded the entire economic pie. Modern research confirms this pattern. Companies that focus purely on extracting profit from customers don't last. Companies that focus on creating genuine value become unstoppable. Think about the wealthiest companies today. Apple creates products people love. Amazon creates convenience people depend on. They extract tremendous profit, but only because they created tremendous value first. Solomon understood this 3 millennia before business schools started teaching it. And this connects to something even more counterintuitive about how Solomon actually protected his wealth. The 6th secret is wealth preservation through generosity. And this is going to sound backwards until you understand the mechanism. Solomon was famous for his generosity. He gave lavish gifts to visiting dignitaries. He paid his workers well. He held feasts. He supported widows and orphans. Modern people would call this wasteful. Solomon called it insurance. Here's what he understood. In a world without banks, police, or legal systems as we know them, your wealth was only as secure as your relationships. Solomon's generosity created a network of people who were personally invested in his success. His workers were loyal because they were well compensated. Foreign kings were allies because they benefited from his friendship. The poor he helped became a population that supported his reign. The wealthiest families throughout history have known this secret. The Medicis patronized artists and scientists. Carnegie built libraries. Rockefeller funded medical research. They weren't just being nice, they were building social capital that protected their financial capital. When you're generous strategically, you create a moat around your wealth that can't be breached by market crashes or political instability. Now, if you're serious about applying these ancient wealth principles to your own life, and you want weekly breakdowns of financial wisdom that actually works, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Drop a comment below and tell me which of Solomon's 7 secrets resonates most with you. Alright, let's talk about the final secret. Secret number 7 is the knowledge acquisition obsession. Solomon wrote 3,000 proverbs. He wrote over 1,000 songs. He studied plants from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of walls. He studied animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. He learned from everyone who visited his court. His hunger for knowledge was insatiable, and this is the secret that makes all the other secrets possible. You can't develop wisdom without learning constantly. You can't identify multiple income streams without studying various markets. You can't form strategic partnerships without understanding what others need. You can't think long-term without studying history and trends. You can't create value without understanding what people actually want. You can't be strategically generous without knowing where generosity creates the most impact. Knowledge is the multiplier on every other wealth principle. Solomon reportedly met with scholars, traders, queens, craftsmen, and philosophers from every nation. Every conversation was a chance to learn something that could be applied. He treated information as his most valuable asset because he knew that every other asset flows from what you know. Recent studies of self-made millionaires show they read an average of 1 book per week. Billionaires dedicate hours daily to learning. They're following Solomon's pattern without realizing it. Your income grows in direct proportion to your knowledge, but only if you're applying what you learn. So here's what this means. Solomon's wealth wasn't magic, it was methodical. He prioritized wisdom over money. He built multiple income streams. He formed strategic partnerships. He thought in decades. He created value instead of extracting it. He used generosity strategically, and he never stopped learning. You don't need to be a king to apply these principles. Every principle Solomon used is available to you right now. The question is whether you're willing to reverse engineer your approach to wealth the way Solomon did 3,000 years ago. Remember, the difference between those who build lasting wealth and those who chase money is simple. One group studies the patterns, the other ignores them. Watch another video here where I break down exactly how ancient wealth principles apply to modern investing.